All right, we're back with another conversation. This, of course, is a special series of consulting calls I'm doing to celebrate the launch of the new book, Buying versus Starting a Small Business. Today, we've got Mikhail. Thanks for being a part of this. You want to talk about a business that you are about to launch, is that right?
Yeah, David, I appreciate your having this time for me. And I read your stuff all the time and watch your videos, and so I consider you sort of an expert on finding fatal flaws. So when buying a business, that's one of the key things is finding those flaws, whether it's in accounting or the actual business model, or double counting things and kind of so your wisdom on that is really great. So I have a business that is about to start an offshoot of my 31 years running sports.
Okay.
And in my 31 years running sports, I've become, I think, the nation's best at one or two or three weird things. And a couple of them are not really sellable because they're the type of things that people would think, oh, I know how to do that. And so the fatal flaw is just human arrogance, which you can't overcome in some situations. And that's understandable, and I've experienced that in this industry before, so I trust that I've found those fatal flaws. But the last one of the three areas that I'm an expert in is uh, risk management in recreational sports. So this would
Gotcha.
be like starting a new business, consulting in that field. Now, the fatal flaw, and it's been so fatal that it's been on the shelf for 2 years. The fatal flaw is that it's not a sexy sell. It's not something that someone sees and says, I got to have that. Um, the the client would be Parks and Rec directors.
Okay.
The secondary client would be the city risk managers. So when I talk about being an expert in risk management in recreational sports, people who run recreational sports are either cities or occasionally um, private organizations. Um, so private organizations, though, never quite, they're always struggling. And so they're not going to really pay for consulting. So my client is the city rec department, and maybe with a
Okay.
nudge or a push from the risk manager of the city. And I come in and do a 5 module, 2.25 hour class on ways, six different topics on mitigating risk.
So
Um,
the five modules is done over an afternoon, is that correct? Or are we talking about 5 afternoons?
it's done over an afternoon, and it's taped to where I anticipate at least 50% of the people missing it for various reasons or ducking out halfway through. So it would have a taped equivalent.
Okay.
Now, where I come to you is maybe all sorts of areas you can identify as potential problems or challenges, but one I know for sure is that it's not a sexy sell. So what I've decided currently as the way to overcome that is to have a salesperson, with a good voice and a good attractive sort of voice come in and make that personal connection. So the idea is kind of when you sell Girl Scout cookies, for example, and I didn't think about this till now, but when one sells Girl Scout cookies or buys Girl Scout cookies, you're typically buying it because the kids are there in front of the
Mhm.
store. You're not really trying to eat that way, um, or buy expensive cookies. It's because of the personal
No, you want
approach.
to help. You want to help a kid out. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got two ways to sell this, and I'm right on the edge of starting. One is that we have somebody that's you like their voice, and then you want to please the salesperson and hopefully buy something. Now, the difference between my product and Girl Scout cookies is that my product is actually very, very justifiable for the amount of money that a city would spend educating their training their worker or workers. It's a very justifiable expense. So it's different than Girl Scout cookies in that regard. So the idea is salesperson, not me emailing them, but a salesperson contacting them, and then the person on the other end realizing, oh, this is a justifiable expense. So that's where I sit. And I spoke to you about this about 2.2 and a half years ago. But it got shelved because I couldn't figure out how to sell it.
Okay. So I don't think anyone's going to buy it because they think that your salesperson's a great guy or lady. So let's backtrack a little bit. I want to cover a few key sort of points in this backstory. So you said you ran sports for 30 years. Does that mean like you worked in a Parks and Rec operation of a city, or you were like running a baseball league? Like, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it's recreational sports. I was one of the first in the nation. I think I was the first in the nation to run recreational sports privately. So that business had about 220 steps to it, but I got it up and running, and it was successful, and it still is successful 30 years later.
Okay.
So I'm in a category that's somewhat new, which is a private business running recreational sports.
Okay. So um, I have been a part of a lot of different volunteer and not-for-profit organizations, many of whom dealt with youth. And so I probably have a lot of like experience in similar kinds of bodies and organizations.
Yeah.
And I've seen the way that they buy training services like this. So I'll give you an example. When I was a scout leader, um, every year the local scout association bought a certain number of slots in a St. John ambulance first aid course.
Okay.
And they wanted, to make sure that some of the leadership team in every group in the district had taken this course in the last 3 years. So they actually had a skills competency management kind of thing where they were paying for this because they wanted to make sure that they had these skills, available should someone get hurt, right? That they had someone who had a little bit of training.
Yeah.
And the one big thing that I think is missing from your whole analysis of this is insurance. Because when I have been, for example, on the board, I was on the board of directors of a children's camp. So they owned a property and facilities. It was a not-for-profit organization. Insurance was a huge thing that we constantly talked about. When I was a member of a board of directors for a seniors housing building, director's liability insurance was a huge thing that we talked about. And in scouting, uh, everything we did, basically all of our on the ground rules were dictated by the insurance company. So, like as you're probably aware from the news, over the last 30 years, there unfortunately have been some incidents where people have been in organizations like Scouts and they've done terrible things in taking advantage of their position. So when I was a scout leader, for example, there was a rule that scout leaders could never be alone with the youth. So we had a two deep rule at all times. And that would mean that at any moment, any leader had to be with another leader when they were with youth, unless it was just their own children. And then the secondary reason why that was important was because if you were somewhere with a bunch of youth and then somebody like cut themselves terribly, there were two of you. One could take the child to the hospital, right? And there would be a second leader left to watch the kids. So it was all of those policies were dictated by the insurance
Yeah.
company because in any circumstance where something happens to one of the participants in the program, the insurance company is the one that bears the burden of damages, right? And so the insurance company is basically looking at all of these different activities and sports, et cetera, with a view to how can we collect premiums and never have to pay a claim. That's the ideal profit model of an insurance company, right? Collecting premiums, never pay a claim. And so my own daughter just turned 16 and she got her beginner's permit, and when I talk with my insurance broker about car insurance for her, what's the first thing that the insurance broker asks? You know?
Yeah. Well, how old did you say she was?
She's 16, so she's just getting her
Oh,
beginner's permit. But of
oh,
course,
shit.
the first thing he asks is, has she taken a driver's ed program?
Right. Right. Okay.
Right? Because the insurance company gives different rates based on whether you've done the education program or not.
Right. Right.
And so that I think is the crux of what you need to figure out. Because if you are able to help these organizers of recreational activities reduce their risks, the biggest number one beneficiary in all of that is their insurance company,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so
I had that.
and that's the angle is because if you can get yourself certified, approved, or recognized in some way by some of the insurance organizations that cover municipalities or these not-for-profit sports groups, like when you think recreation, I think like the association that runs the baseball teams or something.
Yeah.
Like the insurance is a huge thing for them, and if you can be sort of recognized by the insurance companies, and they can
Well,
tell these people,
that's
sorry,
interesting. I had that as a year two focus, but I hear what you're saying that it's equally as big, if not bigger, than going to the city rec departments. Is that what you're thinking?
I think you should go to the city rec departments and you should l- try to open a conversation to learn how they buy stuff, in particular about their insurance,
Okay.
and say what is your relationship with the insurance company that protects the city, and what interactions do you have with them? How do they make rules or dictates for you that help govern how you operate in the rec department? Like, does the insurance company forbid certain activities? Do they mandate that you run things in a certain way or that your staff have certain training, for example? Ask them who their insurance company is. I would want to talk to insurance companies. I would want to ask them questions like, what are some of the biggest, dangers that they see from these programs, and talk with them about your program, and see where the fit is, because all of these organizations that you're talking about have budgets. Like, the scouts didn't get free first aid training from St. John Ambulance. We had to pay for that, and there was a budget for it, and the budget came out of the membership that the children and families paid to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And they said we need to allocate some money for this because it's important. And so, you know positioning your product, let's talk about how it's sold. So you talked about the afternoon program. what what do you envision? Have you run some of these yet?
Runs, when you say the word these, what are you referring to?
Like these training sessions, like have you done a class before?
Um, I sent you an email that is in your box, and it it has two things in there. One should only take you about 15 seconds, which is to click on the consulting website, and you probably get a glimpse of the brand. And then
Okay.
the other is a 30-second ad. Now, based on your initial look at both of those, because that's all anybody's going to do is just an initial look. The question to you is the packaging looking sharp enough to, to at least open these dialogues?
Yeah, absolutely. It totally looks sharp. You look like a professional, and you've got these statistics up here, like 31 years of experience, 180,000 youth and adult, games overseen, 80 agreements written, 525 referees trained, 65 facilities, 85 news conferences, 105 independent contractors managed, like 1.5 million event league participants. Like you clearly come across as a pro. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about the advertisement? It's 30 seconds, if you don't mind clicking on it. No, because that will actually help the conversation to know where I'm at in terms of the packaging.
So I don't know if this is going to be recorded. Can you hear that? So it's
On
a, it's a
my end,
voiceover ad, and they're showing me pictures of different kinds of basketball and other adult stuff, and it's you're talking about Princeton University, you're taking like advantage of other brands that people would certainly recognize.
Basically, it's a layout saying, I'm a consultant. This is why I'm a consultant, and this is what I can offer you. And I guess my question to you, as I head pretty close to launching, is, is the packaging of these two items good? Because I think this is it. Outside of the conversations I have, these are the physical items somebody might get right before a meeting or even at a meeting.
Yeah, this is totally well put together, especially for somebody who's like a solo consultant. Like, obviously you didn't do it. Doesn't look like you did it yourself. Like you hired someone who's clearly done this over and over again to put these kinds of little videos together. And it's a 2-minute video.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so have you delivered that training to anyone before?
The actual training um, has been done informally to all of my people many times.
Right.
My very first, I do have an opening that was almost a miracle with the city of Irvine. Irvine is a really, really well respected Parks and Rec community, perhaps one of the best in the nation, well funded, well organized. And they have agreed to take my class. Now, it's partially because I did them a big favor about a month or two ago. So it just worked out really lucky. I have a really neat window. I sent this to them and I said, hey, remember I told you I needed a favor. The favor is I need you guys to be my first client as I enter this. So I do have my first in. There'll be a live class. I'll do all these topics live. It's written out. I'm pretty good in, off the cuff. Um, and I'll film it just in case we get some nice clips. But yeah, I sort of have, one group ready to go. I don't know if it's, hearing what you're saying is that the materials and certainly getting one under the belt is really being on the right path. So that's good. That's good to hear from you.
Well, the
And
reason why I'm asking you if
yeah.
you've done one before, like I have no doubt that you're capable of delivering an awesome program, and I know that it can. You've already got like outlines and agendas and everything outlining what needs to be in there. The reason why I'm asking is I'm just curious how you envision this being sold. Do you think that you are going to look for one client at a time who is going to buy this afternoon session for their team alone? Or do you envision yourself saying, I'm doing this on these 3 dates in Southern California, and there's 20 seats in each room. And, you know, Newport Beach is going to send one person to one of those classes. Like how, because it's a very different kind of marketing and sales methodology, right? The if a city can buy a seat in the class and the seat is, I don't know, $400, $500, it's an entirely different kind of purchase decision as if you're talking about taking the whole Parks and Rec staff together on an afternoon and it's several $1,000s.
Well, I don't know what will present itself. And this is one of the reasons I'm going to do this call
Yeah.
today, of course. And also, after I do my first 10 to 12 sales calls, I'm going to revisit with another call and try to refine this thought. You've had more experience than I have in terms of selling wisdom. Um, so on one hand, I sort of feel like I should take what I can get. So if a city says, "Hey, we're only sending one person," okay, I'll take it. If a city says we're going to send the whole team of 12 people, 12 of our 20 people happen to be available, the other 8 will watch the video. Can you come down to our city? I might jump in a car and do that. Um,
Yeah.
to kind of get some momentum. But I think the home run, of course, is for anybody is when you're not traveling and running around missing your kids' events and so on. So it would be a Zoom call type teaching that occurs live 2 times a month. And one of them might have 4 participants, the other one might have 32. But that's kind of what I was visioning. But this is where I kind of ask you, what are some things you might see?
Yeah. So I have online training programs right now that are completely automatic that people just sign up and do. But they all started off as live in-person seminars. And the value in doing it live and what you're going to get out of the session in Irvine is that when you're live and you're delivering material, you get to look at people and you get the visual and nonverbal cues when people
Okay.
don't know what you're talking about. Like you can see confusion on people's faces, right? And then you know to stop and say, "Oh, did you have a question?" Or how about we look at it this different way? Can I explain it a different way? Right. And then you can see what works. And it helps you refine the material. It helps you make the product better when you do it live, I think. And the problem with doing it over Zoom, for instance, is that um, people are distracted. And I think that sort of one of the best ways that you could do a program like this would almost be a hybrid of delivery methods where maybe there's like a workbook and then people listen to like 2 hour long recordings, maybe audio, and then they do some workbook sheets, and then maybe there's a group session where they meet and you have like office hours or something, and people kind of work through a workbook like that and have support while they consume content on their own, because that way they can listen to the tape twice or 3 times and they've always got this reference they can go back to. Something like that may ultimately be what your product ends up looking like. um, the you mentioned earlier though about the pleasant person going in and making a sales pitch and people wanting to do something because they like the person. There's
Correct.
another aspect to training that you need to consider, especially if you're going to be selling to cities, and that is that everyone likes a little break out of the office. And so there is something that's attractive to people, especially if they're kind of stuck, in a city administrative kind of place. The whole idea of spending a day or the afternoon out of the office at an offsite training is kind of nice. And so there could be some appeal for that to some people. So what you may and a little, part of this is trying to figure out what the market will demand. And so I could see, for example, that you test some things out. You're in Southern California, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So you got a lot of people there and a lot of municipalities. So it's a great place to experiment with this kind of stuff. What you could do is you could create a calendar with some live training events, sort of, I don't get a gym and a classroom at a YMCA or something like that for an afternoon, have 3 dates that are 2 months apart. Now you got a training schedule. And so what you can then do is you can now create a campaign where you can say, the fall training session is upon us. We have these 3 dates available. We're also doing private sessions for groups of 12 or more, right? And so you can send your staff to one of these sessions, or we can arrange for a private training session for your group and try to sell it. And so if you find out, for example, the names of the park and rec directors in all the municipalities around you, and then I would also then include some of these sports organizations, like if there's minor baseball, minor basketball, gymnastics association, all that kind of stuff, um, develop a mailing list. And whether you go postal mail or email or what have you, uh, market to that list of people, because those are your suspects who you think are going to be interested, and then see what the feedback is and try to have some conversations. So it doesn't cost very much to get 500 postcards made at Vistaprint or something, and then you can mail those to all those park and rec directors. And a week and a half later you start picking up the phone and start calling them. Hey, did you get the postcard I sent out? We've got 3 training dates coming up this fall. I'm wondering if it's something that might be interesting to you. Now here's what you may encounter is you may encounter, because you're talking about cities and the way municipalities are run, you may run into, our budget's already set, right? And these are the
Right.
kinds of things you need to listen to because it could very well be that they need to decide perhaps before the end of April that they want to take your training session next year.
Yeah.
Because they may have to create their budget this winter in order to allocate money for the next year. But if one seat in one of these training groups is only a couple $100s, there could very well be some discretionary room in the budget where they could just decide to do that and send one person. And what can happen is many people may decide to send one person and then get that individual's feedback from the program before deciding if they're going to send other people. So that's kind of marketing and sales. Opening conversations with insurance companies, though, I think would be very interesting to find out who you would talk to. Um, do you buy insurance from an insurance broker?
Yeah, I bought from a group called Monument, and they insure most of they probably insure 70% of all these little sports organizations all across America. And I brought it, I have a decent relationship with the ownership, at least to where they would hear me. They would take one call.
Yeah,
And, part of what I'm doing is making sure when they take the call, their attention span might be, even though I've been paying them 25,000 a year for 30 years or something like that, I probably only have 1 minute of their attention span. And so the idea is, what can I hit them with quick so they understand that this is serious? This might have value to them. And it's good to hear you liked the two material pieces I have, because that's going to be something they look at in the first 30, 40 seconds. And then I'm going to go into the speech with them about, I think I can help you limit your payouts, because the training's really good. Like
well,
really, really good.
yeah, so I think in the world of sports you probably talk about attitude a lot, right? Yeah. So let's talk about that because I think that you are going into this with this idea that there's a big wall that you have to scale, that there's this monumental issue. When it comes to business sales, um, all you do is present opportunities that people may choose to participate in. And people will definitely participate in opportunities that benefit them, right? So you hit the nail on the head. When you have that 30 seconds of initial talk time with them, you just say, "Hi, it's McCall. I do risk management for parks and rec people to help make sure that people don't get hurt. I'd like to have a conversation with you about how we might work together, or if there might be some opportunities for me to help your insurance clients reduce their risks, and so that maybe you wouldn't have as many payouts, and perhaps there could be some premium benefit to them. Would you be interested in a conversation about making your clients better at reducing risk?" I mean, the answer to that question has to be yes, right? Of course, they would love to have their clients reduce risks
Yeah.
because if they can collect premiums for a year and never pay it out to anybody, then they're going to have their most profitable year ever. So they have a very big monetary interest in helping their clients in that way. And if they can see that you are a way to do it, like this is going to take this could have a spectrum of responses. For example, if they think there's benefit, but they don't think it's quantifiable, they might say, well, we're going to take your course, or we're going to have some of our adjusters or some of our own risk people take your course, and we're going to decide what we think of it, and maybe we'll recommend it to people, or we'll give it some kind of seal of approval, right?
Uh-huh.
And we'll let you use our name. We'll let you say, hey, this insurance company says it's worthwhile. That would kind of be like the minimum. And then the most extreme would be, hey, we're just going to hire you to give this course to everyone that buys our insurance. That would be the ultimate extreme of them just saying, we're going to eat the cost because we can see how it's going to save us so much more. And then there's all these variations in between where they could say, oh, well, maybe we'll give a percentage discount off the premium to people who've done your program.
Yeah.
which comes back to the driving school analogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like my dad was a speed skating coach for years and years and years, and he used to take these national coaching certification programs, and
Yeah.
and it was all part of this, staff development, and they were all volunteers, but there was a cost to these programs, and it was all about improving sort of the caliber and the quality of the people in the organization, with a view of developing the athletes, all that kind of stuff. And so what you're talking about doing is the same kind of ongoing skills development that is going to increase the quality of the people in this industry.
Yeah.
What Now, let me ask you this about your business model. If I go and take your course for an afternoon, do I get some kind of certification or piece of paper?
Well, it would be one we just make up. There isn't a governing board. And we would be honest about that. We would say we're going to send you a note saying you've completed a 5 module class in this particular topic. That
Right.
means that I probably have to create a version of my class that has a workbook or a testing that the person actually watched the videos, I'm assuming.
So so here is a mistake that in your thinking, you
Uh-huh.
don't have to have some kind of national governing body or anything to create a certification.
Okay.
Your company can just be a you can just issue certifications for people to pass your tests.
Okay.
And I have run into several private companies. Well, I mean, look at the software industry. I mean, the biggest certifiers of people in the software industry are Microsoft and Amazon and Google. And the network people, I forget who they are off the top of my head, but like people are always taking these certifications, and it's just like an online class and they get this certificate. And in that world, those certifications mean a lot, right? And so from your own business model point of view, like I seem to recall that with the first aid training that I took, the certification expires after a certain amount of time. So you take the training, and then after a couple of years, you're considered to no longer be trained because it's been too long. And I think that this has got to be an important part of your business model, because I think that there needs to be sort of the initial training, and then there's got to be some kind of update or maintenance.
Yeah,
So
we're
so
we're yeah. Hmm.
so that you can create a long tail of revenues. And you know so it could be something like this. Anyone who takes the initial training in the afternoon, maybe there's some kind of testing at the end, to your point, like where they have to pay attention, they have to pass a test, they become certified, but then they become a member of your uh, program. They become a card carrying member of your training. But then in order to maintain the certification, they have to do like an annual um, education credit thing that they have to pay 99 bucks for. Well, then after a few years, you've got a few hundred of these people that are paying $99 every year to re-update their certification. And that's how you build this into a really successful cash flowing business, is by creating this growing body of people who are part of this program, and who are also, getting this updated training and reinforcement of the skills and principles. Because, people forget things over time, obviously, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you see with all your experience, and some of your business grew organically out of, over time. But do you see a sales process as simple as make sure the product has value and then get a preview out to the people you're about to call? Preview could be a postcard or an email blast that kind of just walks them through what you're about to call them about. And then you simply call. I mean, a physical phone call. Um,
Yeah. So what I would do, I mean, I didn't watch that whole 2 minute video you sent me. I just kind of perused it while we
okay.
were talking there.
Yep.
But um, I I would imagine something like a postcard or a letter that you're sending out to the heads of these Parks and Recs department. And there should be a QR code that they can scan with their phone that will bring up a 2-minute video about who you are, what you're doing, and what the benefit is for them. And you're always thinking, what's in it for me? So that should, so like this video should open, hey, I know you're the head of a Parks and Recs department, and one of the quickest ways to ruin your day is to come into the office and find out that someone's been injured in one of your programs. My name is Mikal. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and my number one task every day is teaching people how to run these programs while reducing the opportunity for injury and risk. And I've got training programs coming up this fall that you can send your staff to, or we can come and do a private session. And we have ongoing support to make sure that your people can maintain their certification, you know, some kind of statistics that are relevant. Like, and some of this might be hard in the beginning, but 10 years from now, you might want to be able to create some sort of benchmarking data. Like Irvine's going to take your training. Let's say 10 years from now, Irvine has 30% fewer injuries than an equivalent city in another place. Like, wouldn't that be a great kind of benchmark to be able to have some kind of measurement? It would be hard to put together, but if you ever could, that would be the ultimate sales tool.
Yeah. Interesting. You mentioned one sentence real early into this where you were de-accentuating the importance of a salesperson that has an attractive that's an appeal. I think you were making the point that the product has to have the appeal, but what were going back to that? What were you implying with that?
Well, because people who are going to spend money, particular not-for-profit organizations and cities where people are spending, members or taxpayers' money, they're accountable to their organizations, and there has to be a real reason why someone's going to buy something. When I was a summer student in university, I used to work for a lottery commission, and we were like, owned by the government, right? And our purchasing protocols were pretty, you know, granular. Like we could not really get away with spending money on anything silly. Like there were always, a possibility that someone would come along and kind of follow through everything that you spent money on and all that kind of stuff. And so there's got to be value in what you're doing. And the person who makes the purchasing decision has to be able to look smart in front of anyone who might question the decision in the future. Like this is the fear of one of these Parks and Recs managers, is that they're going to put money into hiring you and then that they're somehow going to look dumb. Like,
Okay.
so so here, when you sell to people, there's a lot of people out there will talk about how when you sell to an individual, you're satisfying an emotional need a lot of the time. So if someone's trying to be happy, or they're trying to avoid pain, or they're trying to feel special, or whatever it is, right? When you're
Correct.
selling to an organization like a city, you are trying to sell something that has benefit to the city, but the person who makes the purchasing decision is still a person. So when I worked for American Express, I was doing revolving credit programs, and it was supply chain management stuff. It was really boring for most people. But when I would go into a big company and speak with the CFO, the first question I would ask would be, are you interested in looking at ways to extend your days payable outstanding in this organization? Would that help you meet your goals this year? And the reason why I ask that question is because for a CFO to make more efficient use of the operating capital in the business could actually be tied to their own performance review.
Hmm. Well,
So
that
so
brings, yeah, that
so
brings
what
up,
I'm doing is
yeah.
I'm saying, hey, I'm here to talk about this organization, but what I have to offer is going to personally benefit you in your next performance review. And so that's what gets the person to pay attention, right?
Well, we talked about my team that's about ready to start selling. We talked about three motivations. The first is keeping participants safe. Now, if you're a business owner, that really is important. If you're a city worker, oftentimes there's a disconnect because they're not the ones dealing with the lawsuit. Oftentimes, no offense to the Parks and Rec
Mhm.
directors, but they just go home at 4:30 p.m. and they're good. So
Yep.
the secondary appeal is to keep your city liability free. Well, that one might appeal to them a little more, but also they're not as connected. So if you have to, the third appeal is this is good for your career to claim that you're the one that brought this here. So as an example,
Yeah.
you're in a city, Portland, Oregon, and you really don't like Portland anymore. There's some things going on there. And you're jealous because you wish you worked for the Parks and Rec department in Bend, Oregon. Bend, Oregon's very, very beautiful and resort like and so on. So you wish you were over there. So the idea is, why don't if I was talking to you and you were the Parks and Rec director, why don't you be the one to bring this safety program to your city? That way you can add it to your LinkedIn or your resume. And, it'll strengthen your position to get out of town someday when, to a better city that your wife wants to live in. So that's kind of an odd sales pitch, but it's sort of a motivation,
Yeah.
kind of agreeing with what you said. Is there a better way to phrase that? Because the way I phrased it is long and it's
No, it isn't because what you're doing is you're offering them an opportunity to look good and 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 to look good by doing the right thing, by creating programs that are
right.
safer, right? And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, your program has value. People who take your program and implement its teachings are going to be able to run programs that injure fewer people and have lower risks, right? So this is a net good in any way you look at it. So the the other thing that you would need to do, so this would be a marketing support. This is more of a longer term activity, is to be doing things to support the name of that certification. So whatever you call the certification, like, for example, you might then want to create a podcast or YouTube channel or something that shares that same name. And so you create content because here's one of the things that's going to happen. For example, I mentioned a postcard campaign with a QR code that has a video. Someone who's curious about it may then start snooping, searching online, looking for other content about what you're doing. And so you want them to find this treasure trove of additional content geared around that certification name or that brand name. And if they start to consume that content, it's just going to reinforce all the messaging of that initial sales pitch, where they're going to see through your demonstrated expertise, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's got a great deal of understanding. There's probably a ton I can learn from this person. And then if you think about the purchasing process, so if one seat in one of your training programs is a couple $100s, that Parks and Rec person may have the discretionary budget to just do it, to buy it and send a person there, for example, or themselves. If they say, I want to bring you in for the whole team, there could then be another layer. So they might have to then go up to the next rank in the administration to say, I need to make this bigger purchasing decision. Now, as they go up the ranks of the administration, there's these resistance levels where people are just saying, no, we don't have the money. But the more collateral, the more firepower, the more content that can be brought into the conversation, the you're like empowering that Parks and Rec person to then be able to show the next person up the chain that this is a good investment. The frustrating thing for you is probably going to be the length of the potential length of the selling cycles here. So this is what I would imagine, and I could be wrong, but this is what I would imagine is if you created a calendar of training events this fall and then you started to try to sell them, you could get quite a few places that are willing to send one person. That one person goes, comes back, shares some of what they learned, talks about how great it was, now you might be able to get yourself on the drawing board maybe for a private training session for the whole staff, but probably in the next budget year. That
Right.
with these organizations, that's the issue, is you've always got these budget year cycles that you have to manage. So there are these long sales chains. So this is why it's important not to forget the private association and volunteer sector. Because here's the other thing that happens. When I was in scouting, there were occasions when there were training opportunities and there was no budget, and the scouters just spent their own money.
Okay.
They're like, I want to do that, and they would just whip out their credit card and they would just go do it, right? And so this is where reaching out to the minor sports associations and all that kind of thing can really be valuable, because you could reach an association who literally has no money for it, and there could be people there at the table in the board or coaches and stuff who just say, well, that sounds great, I want to do that, and they could just go, they could just pay for it on their own, right? And so there is a certain discretionary market out there, um, that could potentially bring sales in earlier.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. To me, it feels like the success of this, if the marketing products are done and the knowledge is there, the success sort of moves over to the sales person or sales team in terms of gathering these contacts, getting mailers out or emails out, which we do have a giant email list, but it really becomes a sales thing.
Mhm.
And if I don't have the time to do both my main job and sell, but I do have time to consult, then I probably need to start thinking about how to bring in the right people or person to sell. And there's two types there. One would be the type who administratively can put together brochures and QR codes, and and they aren't always salespeople, because salespeople are often in-person people who aren't good at computer stuff. So really, I see what it wouldn't be the same person. Your materials person was a different person than your actual salesperson,
Well,
most likely.
you know, what you're talking about is you're talking about a marketing person who may not even be an employee of yours. So
Yeah,
there could be a person out there who's maybe a contractor or maybe some kind of
yeah,
marketing firm who could help you with the design of the postcard, for example, and setting up that QR code and packaging it all together. And you pay them for doing that job, and now it's done. And then you work with them, and over time they help you adapt things or whatever. But then you do the mailing. you know if you're trying to sell 20 seats and you're trying to sell them for $400 or $500 a seat, there's really not a whole lot of meat there for a knock on the door to door sales professional kind of person. What you're probably looking at is someone who's good on the phone. That's probably going to be the kind of salesperson that you can really afford, because you're going to need someone who can really churn through your list and be leaving voicemails and sending emails and following up with people, and just burning through that list trying to sell that. And there may even be an opportunity to use some international workers there, someone who you can get at a lower price point. um, but if it can be entirely remote, it just sort of opens the door for you to really be able to find someone who may not, like, Southern California is expensive, right?
yeah. Really expensive. Yeah, yeah. And I think that the product is a fairly easy sell in terms of remembering what to say, because there's really only three things. We're keeping participants safe, your city liability free, and this might be a good thing for you to do for yourself, for your city.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy script. Even if you were to deviate, it's still those three things, we're not going into 7 or 8 layers to this. And then it's
So
like, well, let me think about it. And I assume if they see the video or if they see some proof that this exists, then it moves them to potentially buying. So I don't know that I need the highest skilled salespeople. They do need to be very personable because they're selling to city workers who aren't, it doesn't evoke an emotion. So they do
let,
need to be personal. Go ahead.
let's walk through this in the last few minutes.
Yeah.
How So a room full of 20 people, how much revenue do you need from a room full of 20 people?
And, $300 each.
300 each. Okay. So this is what I would do is I would create my training event on Eventbrite. And on that Eventbrite page, I would embed the video that you have. Maybe it needs to be modified a bit. I don't know. But I would put all the details. I would make that my main marketing sort of landing page, etc., for this test season of training. So on that Eventbrite page, if people land there, they're going to watch the video of you. They're going to see what they're going to get out of the training, why they should take it, etc. It's going to be all the marketing copy is going to be right there. And then 3 different dates are going to be there, and they can just say click buy, and they can put in their credit card. So your landing page, your marketing fulfillment, all of that is just being subbed out to Eventbrite, and they charge you a couple percentage points for setting that all up. You then create a postcard, for example, and I'm sure Eventbrite probably has a QR code generator built into it, probably. So that is going to create the QR code that you put on the postcard. You do a mailing campaign with the postcards to all these Parks and Rec and association directors and everything to drive traffic to the Eventbrite page. I would then see what happens because Eventbrite will track how many people land on the page. And if people are responding to the postcard and landing on the page and not buying, then you know you have a conversion problem. But if people are not looking at the page within 2 weeks after getting the postcard, then you know you have an attention problem. You didn't get their attention with the postcard. And so if you have an attention problem, then the salesperson following up with people, making phone calls, having conversations could be a good way to address it. If
Hmm.
it's a conversion problem, then I think you need to make some phone calls and just ask people, hey, did you get the postcard? Did you go to the website? What did you think? And did you buy a ticket? And what made you decide not to? And just see what kind of forces are at play. They a lot of the time there's that push and pull of iteration in the market where you think you know what they want, it isn't quite right, and you could be surprised what the problem is. So, for example, you could pick 3 training sessions that are on Saturdays and sell no tickets because city workers won't take their own time to go to training, right? And so
Yeah.
the problem is that, oh geez, we should have done the training on a Monday or a Friday, right? Or maybe
Yeah.
a Tuesday, or Thursday, whatever day. But you can address that by having your training maybe on 3 different days. Maybe have one on a Saturday, one on a Tuesday, and one on a Thursday. And if the Tuesday and Thursday sell right out and the Saturday doesn't, then you know what the problem is, right? So it's going to take some experimentation, but this price point falls, I think, within a space where most parks and rec directors, a $300 expenditure is probably something they face all the time,
Yep.
replacing a piece of gear or something that breaks. So it's probably not that big a decision. It's just about making it make sense for them and then building upon it. And I really think having some kind of certification where you build this association or group of people that are continuously coming back to reaffirm their training, I think would really give your business value.
Yeah. Well, this has been super helpful, and I'll do a follow-up after in about a week or two with some really specific questions, but this has really been really helpful. So I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Do you want to give your website address in case someone wants to look you up?
Uh, it's probably too hard to remember. It's sportsandrecreationconsulting.com is the
I
name
think
of the website.
that's a perfect URL.
So sport,
Sportsandrecreationconsulting.com.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Awesome. Good luck with the launch. Have a great,
All right.
we'll talk to you later. Don't forget, everyone, if you haven't already, buy the new book, Buying versus Starting a Small Business, Guide to Keep You from Growing Broke. We'll talk to you soon.